Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar presentation today titled Get to Know Your Direct Hire Contract. My name is Ron Hoppy. I'm the CEO of Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, and it's my great pleasure to spend the next hour or so with you today on this very important topic. Thank you to everyone that is joining us from many different countries around the world. I hope you will find today's presentation not only informational but also helpful to you, regardless of what stage of your journey to the U.S. that you may be on. And I think today's content will be of particular interest to those of you that are just at the very front end of getting started on your immigration journey to the United States. We do have a chat opportunity as part of our presentation today. I see some of you are already taking advantage of that. We always ask that if you have joined us today, that you would take just a moment and let us know where you're joining us from. It's always interesting for us to see the many different countries that are represented on a particular presentation. So please just take a moment and in the chat section, just let us know where you're from. We're seeing already we have guests joining us this morning from Singapore, from Jamaica, from Congo, from Nepal, from Philippines, from Taiwan, Jordan, Cape Town, South Africa. So that's just a small representation. Hello from Nigeria. So thank you for doing that. We certainly do appreciate it. As we get started today, we will also set aside time for your questions, and I'd want to be able to respond to as many of your questions as I can. So again, please just jot down your questions, submit them using the chat feature. I'm joined on our presentation today by my colleague, Tracy Drake, who is actively monitoring the chat. He will make note of your question, and he will help to moderate our questions as we get to them at the end of our presentation today. So with that being said, I'd like to jump right into our topic of get to know your direct hire contract. And I think the right place to start today, if we want to understand direct hire contracts, I think it's also important that we understand the different types of contracts or job offers that are out there and that you may have been presented with, or that you will likely be presented with as you initiate your journey to the United States. So there's many different organizations that provide international recruitment services. Worldwide Health Staff Solutions has been doing this work for the past 26 years. And we're very grateful for the many thousands of applicants that have placed their trust in us. When you evaluate or when you're in contact with these different organizations, they're all going to present slightly differently. They may all present opportunities to you slightly differently. But when you really boil it all down, between all the different organizations and all the different offerings, there really are only two primarily distinct options that international nurses have for coming to the United States. The first of those is a staffing agency. So this is an opportunity where a staffing agency or a contract labor provider extends a job offer to a candidate. That candidate is employed by the staffing agency. That staffing agency will pay the applicant once they arrive in the U.S. and begin working. And that agency will determine where the candidate will be assigned, what employer they'll be assigned to. As I said, the agency pays the nurse. The agency then adds a markup or a profit margin and invoices that employer for their services. The alternate or the second approach is the direct hire model, and that is where the applicant is employed directly by the U.S. Hospital or U.S. healthcare provider that is extending the offer to them. We're finding, and we'll talk more about this in a moment, that increasingly candidates are embracing, understanding, and embracing the advantages of direct hire. And we'll talk about those here in some detail as we go along today. The point to make here is that not only are contracts different, but it matters a lot. You know, it is important when you're making this, which is one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your life, that you clearly understand the opportunity that's been put in front of you, that you understand the advantages and the possible limitations, so that you have the information that you can use for making the best decision for your future. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting point. I've titled this slide, U.S. Employer Preferences Have Shifted. And this point actually came up for discussion in a webinar that we did last week on petition abandonment. And I think as you consider the differences between direct hire opportunities that may be available to you and staffing agency opportunities that you may consider, obviously reviewing those contract documents or those offer documents is really important, and it's important that you understand what they say. Never hesitate to ask questions. But I think in addition to reviewing the different documents, agreement documents themselves, it's also important to have perhaps a bit of a larger perspective on what is going on in the U.S. healthcare landscape overall and how it impacts your decision as to which path you may want to choose for yourself. So it is true, U.S. healthcare employer preferences have shifted specifically when it comes to their utilization of contract labor. Staffing agencies provide a form of contract labor, right? They contract with the hospital to provide them with the services of nurses and others that they employ, and the hospital pays them a fee for that. Particularly since the end of COVID, when the utilization of contract labor, particularly domestic contract labor, really grew very, very dramatically, both in terms of volume and cost. U.S. healthcare employers have placed now, particularly in recent times, a very strong focus on reducing domestic and international contract labor. Very simply stated, this means there's more opportunities and a much stronger focus by employers and a stronger preference on the part of employers for direct hire than there is for the utilization of staffing agencies, both domestic and international. U.S. healthcare employers are embracing direct hire for both quality and financial reasons. The staffing agency model costs employers significantly more than if they were to contract with someone like Worldwide Health Staff on a direct hire basis. There's also a lot of research, scholarly research that has been done that clearly indicates that U.S. healthcare providers, hospitals in particular, are able to provide higher quality care and provide and achieve rather better quality outcomes when they have an optimum number of direct permanent core staff as opposed to contract staff. So Document is important. The agreements are important. It's important that you understand them. But I think it's also important that you understand this reality of what is going on in U.S. healthcare overall, and this strong focus and this strong preference on direct hire over any form of contract labor. Next slide, please. So back to your employment offer or job offer or employment contract that you may be presented with. These documents can range anywhere from 1 or 2 pages in duration to maybe 4 or 5, maybe even more. But within that, there's a couple of key terms or a couple of key sections that you need to pay particularly close attention to. And I've listed 3 of them here. The first is contract duration. Okay, everybody is always asking, how long is the contract? Generally speaking, U.S. employers, both staffing agencies and direct hire employers, are looking for contracts that are 3 years in duration. Occasionally, you might find one that's 2, but there's some pluses and minuses to that as well, and we'll get into those here as we go along. So make sure you have a clear understanding of what is the contract duration. Contract duration simply means the time of your initial commitment or obligation to your sponsoring employer. Now, in the case of direct placements, direct hire placements, the contract duration, again, sets out the time of your expected return of service commitment. But at the same time, just because a contract expires in a direct hire model, right? Just because a contract expires, it doesn't mean you have to find a new employer or that your initial employer doesn't want you anymore. It simply means that if you're happy in your work environment and your employer is pleased with your work, because you have been placed there directly on a permanent basis, you can continue your employment there on an indefinite basis, which is very, very attractive, particularly if you've already started to put down roots in that community. Contract duration in a staffing agency model, generally speaking, when that contract term is up, it's up, and you may have to find a new employer for yourself. So contract duration is a very, what we call a top priority contract term. Second one is assignment location. This is where you will find the difference between direct hire and staffing agency to be most pronounced, most profound. And we're going to actually dedicate a slide to this topic later on with a specific example. But just at this point, I'll simply point out that with a staffing agency model, you, the applicant, ultimately don't decide where you will be placed. In fact, if you read that offer, that job offer or job contract from a staffing agency, it'll always have wording in it to the effect that the agency maintains the right to determine the candidate's final assignment location in their sole discretion. Now, will they try to accommodate your preferences? Of course they will. But at the end of the day, they make the final decision where you're located. Number one. Number two, you probably won't know where that assignment location is until you are relatively close to the time of receiving your visa and traveling to the United States. So really, you're accepting this offer blindly because you don't have visibility at the time that you're accepting and committing to its terms as to where you will be actually placed. Conversely, direct hire, you will know the employer that you're interviewing with before you ever even interview with them. You will be able to decide whether that employer's opportunity is consistent with your professional and personal priorities, And you will be able to decide up front if you even want to interview with that employer. And if you do interview, whether or not you would like to proceed by accepting their application. So assignment location, really super important. I know it's a top priority for most candidates. Where will I be placed? Direct hire, you have clear transparency, visibility, and the assurance that you know where you're going, where alternatively in the staffing model, that is different. And then the third priority term that we've identified is something that I've broadly calling breach terms. So these offers or contracts that are provided to international nurses will almost always have language in them that talks about what happens if you don't fulfill your contract. What happens if you don't fulfill your contract? So make sure you're identifying that section of the document. Make sure you read it carefully and make sure you understand exactly what it says because it is really, really important. If we can go to the next slide, just recap some of these points that I've just been making. Contract duration, as I said, generally is for 2 to 3 years. When you are looking at the breach term provisions, breach terms should be based on the contract duration, and the term expiration time should be clearly indicated. So if it says, for example, this is a 3-year term, right? This is a 3-year contract. When does the contract begin, right? Does it begin on the day you sign the contract? Does it begin on the day that your petition is filed? Does it begin on the day that you report to work in the United States? So understanding the term of the agreement, when it starts and when it ends. So really important points on contract duration. If we can go to the next slide, please. I spoke earlier about assignment location and the significant point of difference between the direct hire model and the staffing agency model rests on this topic. In direct hire, you know your location upfront before offer acceptance. In the staffing agency model, the agency decides your final location often shortly before you arrive. So very, very important that you have a good handle on this particular part of the contract document. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you just 2 simple examples of actual wording from a couple of different job offers. Okay, so these are taken from actual job offers or job contracts that are commonly used today. So the first one is referenced as paragraph H. This is taken from an employment contract of one of the larger U.S. international staffing agencies. And Section H refers to work location. And the wording is, the facility where healthcare professionals shall perform the services shall be selected by the employer, the employer being the staffing agency. The healthcare professional agrees to be flexible regarding the location of their client assignment. Okay, pretty clear. You, the applicant, are not choosing, right? It is your employer, the staffing agency, that's choosing. And wording very similar to this is what you would expect to find in virtually any offer that's coming forth from a staffing agency provider. Compare that to, this is lifted directly from the job offer template that we provide to our employers for them to use. And in the second paragraph, it states facility placement it says you will be assigned to, and then name and location of specific facility. So before you ever accept that offer, you are going to be very clearly aware of exactly the employer that is considering you, the employer that you're considering, and where you will be placed, where you and your family will be living for a number of years. So again, just a simple illustration of this point regarding location. All right. So next slide, please. So in understanding your direct hire offer, or understanding all offers, it's also very important to understand the provisions that relate to breach terms. Okay, and this has become a very high-profile topic for a number of reasons. There's been a number of cases actually that have dealt with this issue. So I want to speak today and share with you some thoughts or some insights into when it comes to breach terms, what is permissible, what is not permissible, and how any repayment that you might be obliged to make ought to be calculated. So what is permissible? Different agencies have different models, but generally speaking, across the board, international nurses would expect to find an agency that is helping connect them with an employer, that is paying for the attorney's fees, that is paying for the related filing fees, usually paying for the applicant's airfare to the US, providing them with some amount of temporary housing for free, and contracting with an organization like ours to provide all the related services that are required both by the applicant and by the employer to ensure a successful placement from the time that an applicant is identified, screened, interviewed, hired, filed for immigration, supported through licensure, credentialing, relocation, and even post-relocation support. The costs of that nature, so the costs that employers are actually paying out to have one applicant arrive in the United States, these are costs that the employer is going to look to recover. And generally, this is a permissible activity, provided that it is noted as a term in the initial offer and that the amount claimed is limited to what the employer actually paid. Okay, the employer can't make up costs that are in, they can't add costs that they didn't pay specifically on the part of an applicant, and they certainly can't add costs related to you're not arriving by a certain date, for example. So those generally are permissible. Those costs currently are going to vary slightly. I think you shouldn't be surprised to see if these costs are in the range of $20,000 to $25,000. But anything that is significantly higher than that is probably something that you should be concerned about and investigate further. So what is not permissible? What is an employer not allowed to do? So there's some very clear guidance that has been provided by some litigation over recent years on this topic. Clearly, employers are not able to assert a claim for indirect costs such as training or orientation, They cannot assert costs related to what they perceive to be lost profits because you were not there working. These things are clearly not permissible. Anytime you hear of employers making claims of nurses that are $50,000 and more, that's an egregious situation and one that should be raising all sorts of red flags and alarms. And it's probably an opportunity that you want to not walk away from, probably an opportunity you should be running away from. So not permissible is anything the employer may try to assert that goes beyond the actual direct cost that they incurred. And again, provided that that's a term of their offer to you. So understanding generally what is permissible and what is not permissible, then is the issue of, okay, if I don't fulfill my contract term, how do I calculate how much I actually owe? Some employers, regardless, let's use the example that you have a contract term of 3 years, a return of service commitment of 3 years. Let's say the applicant completes 50% of that commitment, 18 months. And let's say the employer's direct costs in the process of hiring, recruiting, immigration, etc., relocation, were $20,000. So we have a scenario where a candidate has completed 50% of their contract period. The total cost that the employer incurred in this hypothetical situation is $20,000. So in this specific circumstance, the employer would be able to assert a claim for 50% of the $20,000 as the applicant has already completed 50% of their return of service commitment. So the amount of repayment should always be recalculated as the percentage of the return of service commitment that has not yet been completed. Is it 10%? Is it 90%? Is it whatever it is? It's a simple calculation. What percentage of the return of service commitment has not been completed? Multiply that by the total cost that the employer incurred, and that should be the amount that an employer can assert. If they are asserting, let's say in this example, somebody's been there for 18 months out of 36, and the employer's asking for 100% of the cost that they incurred, that is not permissible. They're not able to do that. So understanding breach terms, very, very important. Understanding the assignment location, super important, right? If you're going to uproot your life and move halfway around the world, right? It's important that you know exactly where it is you're going to be headed, who you're going to be working for, etc. So assignment location, contract duration, and breach terms. These are the priority contract terms that you need to ensure you understand clearly in any agreement that you may be looking to sign, and of course, specifically as it relates to direct hire contracts. In a good, solid direct hire contract, you're going to find each of these issues clearly articulated in a way that you should be able to understand clearly. And of course, any questions that you do have, you should always feel free to ask those questions. If you are ever feeling that you're not getting answers or not getting straight answers to your questions, that's a problem. And that should probably give you an indication that this may not be the right opportunity for you if you can't even get answers to your questions up front. So I'll stop there for now. And in the context of questions, Tracy, I'd like to open it up to the questions that we have been receiving. And if you'd please get us started, we'll see how many questions we can get responded to today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron, and thanks, guys. If you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I see some already coming in. So thank you for taking a moment to drop your questions in there. Let's jump right in. And one of the first questions I see, this is a great question. Can I apply even if I don't have recent bedside experience?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, but, right? Now, when someone says, can I apply if I don't have bedside experience? The first qualifier is have you or have you not passed the NCLEX exam? Until you've passed the NCLEX exam, right? Until you've passed the NCLEX exam, no employer can file an immigration petition for you. So applying for jobs before you've passed NCLEX generally isn't advisable. Let's assume you've passed NCLEX and you don't have bedside experience. Generally speaking, that applicant will have a difficult time finding a U.S. employer interested in their application, almost certainly not in the hospital setting, possibly in non-acute care settings. But I would just again add for context that while there is a nursing shortage in the United States, right, there really isn't a shortage for most employers in terms of their ability to hire new graduates domestically. The U.S. is currently graduating more registered nurses domestically than at any time in the past. So if you're a graduate and have no experience, you're essentially the same as a new graduate. Maybe if you graduated some years ago, you would be seen not even as equivalent to a recent new graduate. So it is a virtual certainty that without experience, you will not find interest from U.S. hospital employers, and it will be difficult finding interest from any bona fide employer. I would be very leery of job postings that highlight no experience required. I would be very skeptical, and I would ask a lot of questions. The bottom line is experience matters and experience is important. So any opportunity that an applicant has to gain any type of nursing experience, ideally acute care inpatient experience, is going to be helpful.
Yeah, very good. And that really answers or touches on another question that Rila just asked. Does the employer count previous years of experience? And like Ron said, experience does matter. So all those years will be taken into account, and current experience is the best.
Yeah. So it's a question we get often, right? And in our case, right, we're dealing with many different employers in many different parts of the country. Generally speaking, our employers will count a candidate's prior years of experience. Certainly, they will count their years of acute care experience. So that should be an expectation that if you have 10 years of experience, that will be recognized and that you will receive an offer at a higher rate of pay than someone that has 2 years of experience.
Yeah. Next question. How big of a size, about hospital or clinical size, that employers acceptable? I think what the candidate is trying to ask is what is the average size of nursing staff of some of the hospitals and healthcare employers hiring international nurses?
Interesting question. The honest answer is I don't know
Yeah.
because there's so many different types of hospitals that are set up in different ways. If the question is around staffing levels, right, it's going to vary widely on the hospital itself, the types of clinical services that are being provided. If the question is intended around what are the nurse to patient staffing ratios in the United States, again, it's hard to give a specific answer because those ratios are going to be dramatically different depending upon the care setting, right? In an acute medical center in an ICU unit, you're going to have nurse to patient ratio of 1 to 1, maybe 1 to 2, right? On a medical surgical unit, that could be anywhere from 4 to 8. Again, just depending upon the types of patients that a certain facility may have in its medical surgical unit. That number would go up in a post-acute rehab facility, for example. That number would go up even further in a long-term care setting. So it's really difficult to answer that type of a general question regarding staffing levels.
Gotcha. Do employers accept private nurse experience in normal hospitals, not just home care nurses?
That's the answer is sometimes. So that is, some employers will recognize that, some won't. But it's a good question to ask up front when you're first learning about an opportunity.
Very good. And what if you pass the NCLEX exam and you want to work in an RN position, but you just signed a contract for a junior post?
Again, difficult to answer because some of the facts are missing. So I'm not sure what a junior post refers to. So if that's, I'm going to assume it's something less than a registered nursing position. So if someone has passed the NCLEX exam and is working in a non-nursing position, that experience really isn't going to count or is not going to be seen as important or valuable by most U.S. employers. But before I make too hard of a point, Tracy, on this, I would need to know more about what a junior post is. But assuming it's a non-RN position, I would strongly encourage that individual to pursue RN opportunities, even on a part-time basis.
Thank you. What about certified nursing assistants?
What about them? Is that simply the question?
Yeah, I think, do we hire certified nursing assistants is probably the question.
Yeah. There is in the United States a tremendous need for nursing assistants, and we've hired a significant number of nursing assistants in the past. At the current time, despite the demand, we're taking a far more cautious approach as our employers because the visa processing times for nurse aide type of positions has really become fairly lengthy. We are working with some employers on sort of a new strategy for nurse aides that would require the applicant to have either 2 years of related training or 2 years of related experience, and the employer would need to have a nurse aide position that requires either 2 years of experience or 2 years of related education. At the current time, we're not actively recruiting nursing aides. However, this is something we hope to be doing again in the near future.
Yeah, great point. And do you have any packages for international medical technologists?
The answer is absolutely yes. We have clients that are very actively engaged in recruiting medical technologists. Again, having the required U.S. certification is key. But for medical lab technologists, we'd welcome your resume. Tracy, I don't know if you can put in the chat just a quick link of where someone can submit their resume to get it directly to our recruiting team. But med lab techs, absolutely. I just saw in my emails this morning, we had maybe 8 or 9 med lab techs that just received their U.S. visas within the last day or two, and they'll soon be traveling to the U.S. So absolutely. And in the chat section of your screen, Tracy's just put in the link. You can just click on that link and submit your resume there, and it'll go straight to our recruiting recruiting team.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Karen asked, I was a hemodialysis nurse for 3 years, but I do have a working gap. And now I am an NCLEX passer, and only now I am a newly hired dialysis nurse. Can I apply?
Yeah, again, I would say yes, absolutely yes. The only additional piece of information that we would need is just how big that gap was. Was it 1 year or 2 years, or was it 10 years? Mm-hmm. But someone that has dialysis experience in the past, has passed NCLEX, and is now working in dialysis again, is an applicant that I think would be very, very placeable. Again, just depending on, we would just need to also know what the total duration of that gap was.
Very good. Another recruiting specific question here, but maybe one that could apply to a few people. I'm a nurse from the Middle East, and I have a file in Florida, the Board of Nursing, waiting for my ATT for NCLEX at the moment. So if I work in a mother and baby unit, should I transfer to another unit like ER or medical to have other experience? I had mother and baby, or I heard mother and baby is not a unit experience that employers are looking for.
Yeah. Fantastic question. Fantastic question and great insight on the part of the person that asked that question. So again, just to give a little larger perspective. So within the U.S. healthcare system, including hospitals, there is a shortage of nurses. That shortage of nurses, however, is not distributed equally, right, across all the clinical areas. What we find is within the U.S. domestic nursing workforce, there are certain clinical areas that nurses tend to migrate to because they find working in some clinical areas to be particularly rewarding, to be fulfilling in some way, maybe to be less stressful in some ways. And the types of clinical areas that U.S. nurses tend to gravitate towards would include all things mother and baby, PICU, NICU. So as a result, when U.S. healthcare employers are looking to recruit from abroad, their openings and their most urgent needs tend to be not in those clinical areas. They tend to be in med-surg tele, ER, in some cases OR, various different types of cardiology units, nephrology. These are where the bulk of the opportunities rest. Med-surg, ER, OR, general ICU, some specialized ICUs. Not to say that there aren't positions available in mother baby or PICU or NICU. It's just those positions exist in far smaller numbers than do opportunities in other clinical areas.
Very good point. Very good. Here's the next question. Can a nurse with more than 10 years of experience but no NCLEX get a job in the U.S.?
Technically, you can get a job offer, but that job offer is not going to do you any good because that employer, whoever it is unable to file an immigration application for you without having passed the NCLEX exam.
Yeah, NCLEX is very important. Does direct hire offer orientation?
Yeah, great question. And I think I've seen anyway some misinformation, on various social media channels around this topic. So to the question of, does direct hire provide orientation? The answer is absolutely yes. That orientation is actually provided by the employer that you're going to be working for. It's provided at their facility, at their location, and the duration of that orientation is going to vary somewhat by employer. But a newly arrived, directly hired nurse will receive the same orientation and likely even additional orientation time to that being received by new domestic hires. We find many employers are also providing a mentorship or a preceptorship type of relationship that can easily span the first 6 months of the international nurse being on board. So to the question, do direct hires receive orientation? The answer is absolutely yes, they do.
And does the applicant have the right to obtain a copy of all documents being issued during the application? For example, the I-140 or the ETA 9089.
Yeah. So again, I can speak only for ourselves, right? I can speak only for ourselves. We would never withhold any applicant document. All candidates should be receiving a copy of the ETA 9089 for signature, so they can readily make a copy of that for their own records. The I-140 document itself is not an applicant document, it's an employer document. So, there's some point of discussion there about what the employer's position is in that regard. But generally, yes, applicants should be fully informed as to the status of their application at all times. So if there's a specific circumstance, with additional details, I'd be happy to speak to that. But yes, every employee gets a copy of their ETA 9089, approval notices, receipt notices, correspondence from the NVC. So all of those documents should be readily available.
Very good. A question similar to a previous question, but probably worth repeating. What about someone who has long experience but is now not working?
Again, the answer to that question is, how long have they not been working? Why have they not been working? And do they have plans to return to work in the foreseeable future? Generally, applying for a position in the US while you are not working as a nurse generally is not a great idea. So again, employers in the US have needs. They don't have needs for new graduates. They don't have needs for inexperienced nurses. They have needs for experienced nurses. Again, if you're not working, okay, that's an issue. It would be, you should try to get back to work, even part-time. But to be more specific, Tracy, I'd need more information.
Sure. A sign-on bonus question here. Hello, I've passed NCLEX and IELTS. Do I get a sign-on bonus?
It's a good question. And the answer to that question from our experience is it depends on the employer, right? It depends on the employer. Some employers are offering something in the nature of a sign-on bonus. Other employers are offering other benefits, perhaps extended free housing, or other benefits. So every opportunity needs to be carefully evaluated. Just because somebody is offering a signing bonus, generally that's a positive thing, but that shouldn't be assumed that a signing bonus makes that offer better than an offer that doesn't have a signing bonus. You have to consider everything, right? The amount of the signing bonus, your hourly rate of pay, other benefits that are being provided, whether it's through things like health, dental, retirement benefits, housing benefits, education benefits. So it varies by employer. Some of our employers do offer sign-on bonuses, some do not. So again, it's important that you learn about these things up front, right? But don't be misled that a signing bonus is the sole basis for determining which opportunity is better than another. Certainly, a signing bonus is positive, generally positive, right? But you have to consider the opportunity in its totality to ensure you're not misled by a bright, shiny object up front.
Yeah, great point.
Tracy, there was a question I saw come up here that I'd like to just speak to, maybe just make a more general comment. So the question was, I have heard, right? So whenever somebody starts a question with "I have heard," I just assume that that's something that has been is out there on social media somewhere, right? So this question was, I have heard that direct hire files a green card for one state, where staffing agencies file green cards for multiple states. You have heard wrong, would be my answer to that question. That is factually incorrect. Again, it comes back to your location, right? Staffing agencies are always going to file for multiple states. Why? Because they could place you in Alaska, they could place you in Florida, they could place you in Vermont, or they could place you in Oklahoma. Yeah, that petition is filed for multiple states, but guess what? You don't have a say in where you're going, and you don't know where you're going until closer to the time that you receive your visa. We have clients that have single locations in a particular state. So in those circumstances, we're going to file, obviously, a green card for that employer. We also have employers that have regional and national footprints, and we file green card applications using valid prevailing wages and notice of filings, right, that contemplate all the different locations that employer has, but that employer is still telling you where they're going to place you. So, I have heard direct hire doesn't do this. The question, and it's a fair question, I'm not criticizing the question. Also, the question of, does direct hire provide orientation? And the answer is clearly yes, right? And I'll just say that some of these sort of bits of information that are out there, unfortunately, are planted by some recruitment agencies trying to discredit the direct hire approach, when in fact the direct hire approach is now strongly preferred by both applicants and by U.S. healthcare employers. Really important, as I said at the outset, right? U.S. healthcare employers are shifting their focus strongly to direct hire versus staffing agency. So when you hear things about, direct hire this or staffing agency that, take the time to really dig in and understand not only the question, but make sure you're getting answers from reliable sources and not from somebody that's just trying to convince you, to pursue a particular course of action over another. Obviously, in my discussions, Worldwide Health Staff, we specialize in direct hire. We sincerely believe that is the better option. But I'm also going to tell you that there are staffing companies out there that are fine companies that conduct themselves with integrity. The point I want to make most strongly is there's two different models and they're significantly different, right? And understanding those differences are important. So, Tracy, I see we kind of have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So let's see if we can fit in 2 or 3 more questions.
Absolutely. And I see a great question right here. If I signed a contract in 2021 with a set rate of pay, will the rate of pay remain the same 3 to 4 years later?
The answer, if you're working with health staff and a health staff client, again, I can't speak for others, but I can speak for us. The answer is clearly the rate of pay will be updated to reflect what the current rate of pay is at the time that you're arriving in the United States.
And here's an easy question to answer. Good question. Is there an age limit for employers?
The short and correct answer is no, there is no age limit. I appreciate the question because there are age limits in some other countries around the world. But whether you're 24 or 54, if you are qualified, your application is going to be considered without any consideration of your age.
What if one has got a Master of Science in Nursing certificate? Will the salary be increased or just the same as a nurse having no master's certificate?
The answer is it depends. It depends on whether you're being hired into a position that requires a master's degree, right? If you're being hired into a position that requires a master's degree, then you would be paid commensurate with having a master's degree. If you have a master's degree, but you're being hired into a position that's being also filled, or a similar position to that being filled by associate's degree or bachelor's degree nurses, it's relatively unlikely that you would receive additional pay for your additional education.
And here's a question. I have passed my NCLEX, registered with the Board of Texas. I have worked as a nurse anesthetist for years, willing to work in the progressive care unit. Is that possible?
It's possible. It's certain, again, based on that information, it's possible. And we would definitely invite that candidate to send us their resume for consideration.
Yep. And the apply link is right there, healthstaff.org/apply, everybody. Okay. On the screen.
Let's see if we can pull 2 more. Let's do 2 more because we're coming up on time.
Sounds good. It's not a question. Let's do... All right, here we go. Hi, I'm an NCLEX passer and have a hard time finding a job related to my experience as an endoscopy nurse.
Yep.
What do you recommend?
Yeah, I would refer back to my earlier answer about mother-baby, units. Endoscopy is also one of those units that U.S. nurses domestically tend to gravitate towards. And therefore, there tends to be far fewer endoscopy opportunities than in other departments. So if you're looking and only want to work in endoscopy, I encourage you to be persistent. You probably will have to be flexible as to location, and it's probably going to take you longer to find an opportunity than if you were looking to work in, as I said before, med-surg, ER, ICU, those types of units.
All right. I think I have the final question here to wrap it up on. Can you please tell us the difference between an agency contract and a direct hire contract for EB3 visa in terms of pay rate, working hours, commitment to work with the same employer? And we've touched on some of that, but not all of it.
Okay. Pay rate, let me do this real quickly. Pay rate, staffing agency staffing agency is going to determine your rate of pay, and that rate of pay is going to be at a level that they feel needs to be competitive, but it's also going to be at a level where they can mark that up or add an amount to it to make a profit margin when they're invoicing the client. So staffing agency, they set your rate of pay. It may be the same as nurses in the facility where you're working. It may not be. You have really no influence over that. Direct hire, you have the assurance of knowing that when you arrive at your employer, you will be paid at the same rate and and you'll be entitled to the same benefits and have the same obligations as every other similarly qualified domestic nurse working at that location. So you can be assured that you're going to be paid fairly and equally to your colleagues, your domestic colleagues, in the direct hire model. With regards to terms and other things, I think we've touched on that in the course of our discussion today.
All right. We are at 10:01.
All right. Terrific questions today, Tracy, and lots of them. We could probably take another hour just trying to go through them all. But I trust that your time spent with us today has been useful to you. Please know that whatever questions that you have, feel free to share them with us here with the health staff team. We welcome questions at any time. If you are currently working with us, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to be a part of your journey to the United States. And if you are just contemplating getting started on your journey, I would certainly encourage you to do so. Do so in a very methodical way. Make sure you're fully informed. And we here at Health Staff would consider it also a great privilege to be able to walk alongside with you on your journey to the United States. Please continue to engage with our various social media channels, where you will find information on upcoming webinar sessions. Generally, we are hosting a webinar on one topic or another on a weekly basis. If you have ideas for topics that you would like to have covered in a specific webinar, let us know and we'll certainly consider that. For now, thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.